In November 2015, the award-winning director and Doctor Who fan Peter Jackson released a video where, as he polishes all his Oscars, his daughter asks him who this Stephen Moffat is that keeps emailing him. Then Peter Capaldi runs through the room. This was clearly a hint that he could be guest directing an episode of Doctor Who. 10 years later, he still hasn't. Whilst Series 8 had managed to ride off the wave of popularity and interest peaked by the 50th anniversary, by the time Series 9 came along, the public goodwill was all but gone. On the fourth Doctor of the revival, keeping the show fresh and innovative was starting to wane, as people lost interest not just in Doctor Who, but with terrestrial television in general. Around this time, people were turning more to Netflix and Amazon Prime for their TV binging on big budget dramas such as The Crown, Vikings, or soon to appear Stranger Things. As such, this season would open to a disappointing 6.5 million viewers. Strong but a clear show of decline. The 13th of the week, most of the rest of this season would be stuck around the 20s in the charts. This could be in part due to a not quite as positive as hoped response to the 12th Doctor. The more abrasive and morally questionable Doctor they had aimed for didn't attract audiences as much as they had hoped, in spite of the popularity of Rick and Morty, which had just finished its second season. So going into Series 9, they decided to give the Doctor a midlife crisis. Yes, this would be most clearly shown by his riding a tank into a medieval castle while playing a guitar, a point quoted by many as when they gave up on the show. The sonic screwdriver is now the sonic sunglasses, and he's dragging his guitar around, a sight that anyone whose uncle's been through a midlife will recognise. This was now a character not morally corrupted, but corrupted as a whole, which frankly worked better, leaning more into Capaldi's view of the part and tying into his search for Gallifrey. But before I can talk about the series proper, I first need to cover the 2014 Christmas special, which, despite being broadcast only weeks after Series 8, was filmed much closer to Series 9, so is always listed as such, so there it belongs, I guess.
What seems to be the problem?
Named after the George Michael song, this couldn't be further from the cosy alpine cabin. This is a research base in the North Pole, where face-hugging alien crabs are putting the residents to sleep. Their similarity to aliens so clear they outright state it in the episode.
They're a bit like face-huggers, aren't they?
Face-huggers?
Oh, you know, alien.
The episode opens with Faye Marseille dancing to Christmas tunes to distract herself from the aliens. So long as she doesn't think about them, they won't know she's there. Marseille was probably best known at the time for her appearances in Fresh Meat and Game of Thrones, and was originally intended to take over as the next companion. Playing Shauna, she shows all the signs of a great companion: inquisitive, independent, and funny. However, Clara's woken by the Doctor and Santa arguing on her roof, and they're whisked away to the North Pole. After an alien-inspired horror, it's clear these crabs make you dream, Clara dreaming about Danny, and soon they realise they're all in a shared alien crab dream.
We are
All
dead.
At this point the story turns from Alien into Inception, with dreams within a dream. The Doctor rescues Clara only to find he's too late and she's now an old woman, having dreamt for years of her adventures with Santa. Then it turns out this is a dream and they go away together. This was a result of this being intended as Clara's exit, but Capaldi and Moffat managed to convince Coleman to stay on for another season, and her last minute change of mind meant this U-turn ending, which breaks the flow of the episode and raises questions about whether everyone did actually get out. Though Patrick Troughton's son Michael definitely didn't. Yeah, he's dead.
Because this is a nightmare.
As such, we get robbed of Shauna and have yet another year of Clara, pushing her into being one of, if not the longest serving companion. Despite the ending, for the most part, Last Christmas is a very dark and atmospheric story, with trippy twists and a good chunk of Christmas in Nick Frost's Santa. It's actually amazing it took so long for him to appear in Who, but it's just so perfect. The episode reviewed well and made a good addition to the Christmas schedule. Series 9 would then open on the 19th of September, only a year after the previous season. This was the last time there were consecutive annual seasons, until the episode count was dropped to 8 a decade later, and frankly it's amazing they managed to pull this off even then. Before it started, however, 2 minisodes were released online in the lead-up. These would be the last minisodes, and even here they're very much a hangover from the minisode-obsessed Smith era. The first, simply called Prologue, was just a 2-minute clip of the Doctor talking to Ohelia from A Night of the Doctor and giving her the mysterious confession dial. That would become important later in the series. Frankly, given how short and important this clip is, they probably could have tried to fit it into the opening episode, but given how it's structured, that could have been difficult. The second is a 6-minute short of the Doctor trying to meditate, literally called the Doctor's Meditation, but procrastinating with digging a well. Again, this probably should have been in the actual episode, but can't really fit it. It alludes to him having made a mistake and a final battle. This would lead directly into the series opener. We open in the middle of the Khaled-Thal War. A little boy runs off into a field filled with these creepy looking hand mines, but the Doctor's there to save him, but the child is Davros. This instantly harkens back to Tom Baker's Genesis of the Dalek speech. They literally play it for us.
Do I have the right?
We're then taken on a whistle-stop tour of the universe as this guy, Colony Sarth, who's a collection of snakes that refers to themselves as a plural,
Voting. We are a democracy.
And then Clara's called in by unit because all the planes have stopped and for some reason their first concern is the fuel blowing up, and it turns out it's Missy trying to get their attention, and then she meets Clara and they track the Doctor to some medieval castle, and yeah, this is half the episode. It's a bit of a pointless mess.
And I've also introduced the word dude several centuries early. Let me hear you!
Long story short, they find the Doctor having a midlife crisis and Colony Sarth takes him to meet Davros. Also, the Doctor gave Missy the mysterious confession dial, implying he thinks he's going to die. Sarth takes them to what appears to be a space station, but is actually a disguised rebuilt Skaro. It must be said that the realisation of Skaro here is very true to the classic design of the Daleks in 1963. In general, Hattie MacDonald's direction is very well done in this story. We get to see a collection of a load of past Dalek designs, in part to make up for the travesty that was Asylum of the Daleks as promised 3 years earlier to feature every Dalek ever, only for them to appear in the background unmoving. The rest of the story is mainly the Doctor and Davros talking about the old days. Missy and Clara are seemingly exterminated, and this pushes the Doctor to the point of going back to the boy Davros and seeming to be about to kill him. This foreshadows how the Doctor's overprotection of Clara could bring him to a breaking point. In the second part, it's revealed Missy and Clara actually teleported, and we get some good fun Missy and Clara time.
We could chuck a stone down or something.
Oh yeah, good idea.
Yeah, I like that bit. In fact, what we see of Missy now is less the psychopath we saw previously, but now more of just a madwoman in it for the ride. And funny, leaning into Gomez's history and comedy.
Can I have a stick too?
Make your own steak.
As such, she sticks Clara in a Dalek case, and this is where the problem with this story starts. It's explained that the Dalek casing actually translates what they're saying into more aggressive language, and anything emotional becomes exterminate, to reload their guns. Yeah, the thought that the Dalek mutant isn't actually the evil factor, but rather the casing making them appear to be, that they don't actually say exterminate, really undoes what they are meant to be. The point in this is for the scene where the Doctor almost kills a Dalek before finding it's Clara, giving it a thematic sense within the episode, but it's just stupid and wider implication. The same can be said for the characterisation of Davros. Julian Bleach returns to the role and is a lot less shouty this time.
Detonate the reality bomb!
He's dying and wants the Doctor's sympathy. Discussing his actions and how he thought what he was doing was right, the Doctor plays dodgems in his chair so we get this view of him out of it, but then come the eyes. Oh god, Davros opens his eyes. In the context of the scene, this is really powerful and making us sympathise with him, and he actually starts to cry. We feel sorry for him. But he has eyes. Why did he implant a new eye in the middle of his forehead if he just struggled to open them? Surely it'd be easier to just... I don't know. Again, like the casing translation, this works within the context of the episode for the emotional drive, but the wider implication for the rest of the show is in the area of stupidity, and shows frankly a complete non-understanding of both Daleks and Davros. In the end, it turns out this was all a manipulation to steal the Doctor's regeneration energy. Yeah, this is a mess of an episode and uses tools to drive emotion that ruin the wider show, but Michelle Gomez is really fun, so no complaints there. At the end of the episode, we discover the Doctor used the Dalek gun to destroy the handmines and teaches child Davros the importance of mercy, which is quite a nice scene and a good subversion. As the title suggests, this two-parter is structured with much of the second episode being set before the first, and it's frankly amazing that this isn't used much more often in Doctor Who. The second part opens with the fourth wall-breaking scene of the Doctor explaining the bootstrap paradox, where a time traveller goes back to meet Beethoven only to find it doesn't exist and uses the sheet music he brought with him to become Beethoven. This leads us into the one-off amazing electric guitar cover of the opening theme. Written by Toby Whithouse and directed by Daniel O'Hara, this is a classic base under siege story, with ghosts going around killing the crew and turning them into ghosts. One of which is a Travoli like David Williams' character from The God Complex, but now played by Game of Thrones' Paul Kay. Being underwater, the lighting and use of dark to create the claustrophobic trapped atmosphere is great and always makes for good Doctor Who. Capaldi too is in top form, with 12 being in his full snarky sarcastic mode. This would be revisited towards the end as the crew start to question the Doctor's approach to who he lets die.
So who's next? Clara. Yeah, except now you're going to do something about it, aren't you?
But the episode as a whole has a lot of good humour in it. Creepy, timey-wimey, moralistic and funny, this is ticking all the boxes. After the first part, which mainly follows the characters getting chased around, not that that's a bad thing, in the second part we see what caused this, the Fisher King, who's using the ghost to transmit where he is to invade Earth. But the dam is blown up, killing him, and they use the Doctor's ghost, oh yeah, there's a Doctor ghost, to trap the real ghosts. The Fisher King here is played by Neil Fingleton, who at 7'8" was the tallest man in the EU until his death in 2017. The voice, however, was played by Peter Serafinowicz, aka the voice of Darth Maul, as well as being from comedies such as Spaced, and the Raw was Slipknot singer Corey Taylor. But another interesting addition to the cast is Sophie Stone, a deaf actress playing a deaf character. Despite her disability, the character is a strong team leader, locking horns with the Doctor and Clara, and it's just good to see this sort of disabled representation. All round, Under the Lake Before the Flood is a great two-parter and is understatedly one of the best of Capaldi's run. It's worth mentioning at this point the amazing set work Michael Pickroad put into this one. Believe it or not, this is a set, not location filmed. Anyway, after the Doctor and muse the bootstrap paradox and head off to their next adventure. It's fair to say HBO's Game of Thrones was by far the most popular TV show of the 2010s, by the end pulling in viewership in the hundreds of millions, dwarfing any and all other TV shows. Filmed in the UK with a largely British cast, it was only time before the likes of Doctor Who would bank on its cast. Already in Series 9 we'd seen Faye Marseille, Paul Kay and Neil Fingleton cross over, but now we'd have one of the main cast, Maisie Williams aka Arya Stark having a recurring role. This stunt casting kind of paid off, with the episode managing to just break 7 million viewers, and became the most watched of the season. Williams' performance here as Isilda, however, left much to be desired. She works best here as the Viking villager when she's leaning more into the Arya Stark type, a role she'd played since she was 11, but otherwise is quite wooden with little dramatic range and some truly awful line deliveries.
Mashed up? What are you saying? You will pay for what you have done here today. I am a Viking, a shielder. You have mocked our gods, killed our warriors, and we will crush you on the field of battle.
The episode sees the Doctor and Clara in a Viking village where Odin appears in the sky, somewhat reminiscent of the god in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Of course, this is really an alien impersonating the god to harvest the warriors for their testosterone. They go to war with the Maya warriors, these pretty cool looking dudes, and this leads into a fairly comedic episode of the Doctor training what's left of the villagers for battle.
That could have gone better. Morning.
In the end, he uses their electric eels and an illusion, projected from Isildur's imagination, to scare off the Maya. He blackmails fake Odin with a recording of this embarrassing defeat and they win the day. Except Isildur's been killed making the projection. This single tragedy brings the Doctor to a realisation, harkening back to his question from Deep Breath.
Confront me this face.
We now get an answer. The reason he looks the same as Caecilius from the fires of Pompeii was to remind him he can always save one life. This was an idea that was first put to Moffat by Russell T Davies and was worked into the show. The explanation for John Frobisher, however, is not given. This drives him to use a Maya medical thing to resurrect Isildur, but it will work on her forever, making her effectively immortal. As such, he gives her a second one so she doesn't have to live alone. For what had been mostly a fun story from J.B. Matheson and Moffat, suddenly becomes a lot more existential, ending with this beautiful shot as the camera pans around Isildur, smiling at first as the days fly past, the sun becoming a streak in the sky until it and the stars become just a grey nothing. We close back in on Isildur, her smile now gone, the beautiful score to this scene evolving from a whimsical passage of time to a more intense despair. The final moments as we close in on her face. This is now a face of sadness and anger. In my opinion, this is one of the single greatest shots in all of Doctor Who. The poetry and emotion conveyed in these few seconds is truly outstanding and gives me goosebumps every time. It's just such a shame what it led into.
Yes, it is me.
Frankly, I don't know why they didn't just make this and The Girl Who Died a two-parter, or if they were going to make them separate, then don't have them one after the other, spread the shoulder throughout the series a bit more. Both episodes were directed by Ed Banzalaget and followed the Isildur storyline, but whereas Girl was written by Matheson, this one was written by Catherine Tregenna, only the second woman to write for the revival series. The Doctor comes across Isildur again when she robs a jewel he's also looking for, having become a highwayman. We see glimpses of her adventures and tragedies over the past 900 years, but with only a human memory, she's had to record her life in a full library's worth of journals, tearing out memories she'd rather forget, and keeping the entry of her children dying to remind her never to have any more. She has forgotten most of her life, including her own name, now only going by the first person pronoun, me. She is alone. Turns out Me wanted this jewel because some fire-breathing cat-person alien thing wanted it to open a portal and promised to take her with it. Turns out it needs a sacrifice to activate, and Me is going to use the hanging of a local character, highwayman Sam Swift the Quick, played by Rufus Hound, which I know from the CBBC series Hounded, but you may know as the monk in Big Finish. This portal opens up an alien invasion, so Me uses the spare immortality thing on Sam Swift, resurrecting him and closing the portal. Then the cat thing is evaporated for failing. The Doctor and Me talk in a pub, unsure whether Sam's now immortal, and discuss what's now for her. This is quite a beautifully scored scene. They agree that
While you're busy protecting this world, I'll get busy protecting it from you.
And then end with Clara finally appearing in the final scene as the Doctor sees Me in the background of a selfie. One word comes to mind with this episode: forgettable. The actual plot only seems to exist so that there's a monster of the week, a threat that disappears as quickly as it appears. The main focus are the scenes between the Doctor and me, discussing immortality and how she views herself as something he just left behind.
People are mayflies, breeding and dying, repeating the same mistakes. And I'm stuck here, abandoned by the one man who should know what eternity feels like, who should understand.
But these scenes, as touching and well written as they are essentially just an epilogue to the girl who died, and doesn't provide the content for a full episode, hence the Catman. I swear they just called it Inversion because it sounds like invasion. A heavily political story written by Peter Harness with his usual subtlety of a sledgehammer, this follows the events of the Day of the Doctor, with there now being 20 million Zygon refugees hidden throughout the world disguised as humans. But a radicalist group want to expose themselves and start a war, using the inevitable conflict as a recruiting tool. At the time in 2015 was the Syrian refugee crisis, the largest migrant crisis in living memory as a result of the Syrian civil war and the rise of ISIS. It could not be more blatantly clear that the Zygon splinter group are an allegory for Islamic fundamentalists. In fact, a scene in which a plane is blown up happened to coincide with the Metrojet's 9268 bombing, leading Harness to have a seance in the hope the episode wouldn't get pulled, worth noting it was on Halloween. The allegory continues with us not being able to tell who is human and who is Zygon, making the unit soldiers unable to bring themselves to perform airstrikes or executions, and leading to that stupid church scene.
Date and place of my birth.
I don't remember. I'm sorry, I don't. Don't kill me because I can't remember. Kill it!
Oh yeah, Capaldi's Thick of It co-star Rebecca Fontes in this one. Much of this story is a who's who identity thriller with us not knowing if Osgood is the human or the Zygon, and the twist that through much of the episode Clara has actually been a Zygon in disguise. It must be said how great Jenna Coleman's villain performance is, showing her range and is a style of performance she'd explore a lot more in her post-Who career. This being the first proper Zygon story in 40 years, it was inevitable there would be deviations from the source material. I still haven't got used to the new design, those sharp teeth just not being right, and how they can shoot lightning that turns people into hairy balls. Plus now Zygons don't need a human host to take form, but can just take from people's memories. Also, they seem to be mentally linked to the host, communicating with them, and Clara being able to slightly control the Zygon's actions. However, in the end, Bonnie, the Clara Zygon, and the Kate are standing between two boxes, each with two buttons. On Kate's side, they'll either release a gas that'll kill all the Zygons, or blow up London. On Bonnie's, it'll either unmask every Zygon, or make them unable to change out of their human form. No one knows the consequences because, well, that's how war works.
This is a scale model of war. Every war ever fought right there in front of you. Because it's always the same. When you fire that first shot, no matter how right you feel, you have no idea who's going to die.
This leads to an amazing 5-minute speech by Capaldi, giving off one of his best performances about the futility and cost of war.
You just want cruelty to beget cruelty. You're not superior to people who were cruel to you.
The conclusion is that in the end it's pointless because you'll just end up back at the negotiating table where it started.
How many lives shattered? How much blood will spill until everybody does what they were always going to have to do from the very beginning? Sit down and talk!
Eventually they realise...
It's empty, isn't it?
And the Doctor makes them realise the pointlessness of their actions. The Zygon then becomes a second Osgood, or third, to help maintain the peace between the two sides. This is the last we ever see of Osgood, played by Ingrid Oliver, barring some expanded media such as Big Finish and a mobile game, who would go on to get married to Richard Osmond. It's an interesting twisty story and is shot quite well like much of Series 9 is, however the politics are just too obvious, however the unit action is very good if the depiction of Zygons isn't. Written by Mark Gatiss, this episode is notable for being in a found footage style, a genre popularised by the 1999 film The Blair Witch Project. This goes so far as to being the first ever episode not to have an opening title, instead just having this, and has a narrator throughout. This effect, however, doesn't really work, giving more of a feel of a first-person shooter video game than a horror film. The Doctor and Clara join a rescue team on this abandoned spaceship in the 38th century. They find these Morpheus pods that allow you to only have 5 minutes of sleep a month. In one of them they find Rasmussen, played by Reece Shearsmith. It's frankly amazing Shearsmith hadn't appeared in Doctor Who until this point, having even appeared as Patrick Troughton in An Adventure in Space and Time. Gatiss' League of Gentlemen co-star, Shearsmith continues to work with Steve Pemberton on Psychoville and Inside Number 9. But Gatiss and Shearsmith first worked together on the straight-to-video Doctor Who spin-off Probe. Shearsmith is a massive Doctor Who fan, and for a party trick can recite the entirety of Time Lash backwards.
I am the word. You will lose our command. I shall kill her.
There's another notable casting in this episode in Bethany Black, the first openly trans actress to appear in the show, though she plays an unintelligent artificially bred drone simply called a grunt. Eventually we discover the found footage isn't actually from headcams or CCTV, but is the sleeping sand in the corner of our eyes and the dust in the air, which has become carnivorous due to the Morpheus pods, and have made these Sandmen monsters of the week. Turns out Shearsmith is a mad scientist trying to spread these eye sand monsters, but is of course stopped. The ship is destroyed and they escape, but the Doctor says,
It doesn't make sense! None of this makes any sense!
Well, it's about to make a lot less sense. Turns out Rasmussen is himself a Sandman who made this video with the signal that makes the eye sand like it is, and is transmitting it to us so that by watching this, we too are infected. This is a very last second plot twist and doesn't pay off at all, and just makes an already fairly odd story even more confusing. This episode was a flop, receiving the lowest viewership of the revival so far, and the lowest audience index score since Love and Monsters at only 78, and also holds the lowest IMDb rating of any revival series episode, outside of Whittaker era review bombing. In spite of its pretty good atmospheric direction, this style of episode just feels gimmicky. Gatiss had planned to make this part of a saga or a trilogy of some kind, probably why Shearsmith agreed to this episode thinking he could have a recurring role, but needless to say that never happened. Rigsy from last season's Flatline has a tattoo that is counting down as he is marked for death. With the help of the Doctor and Clara, they search using trap streets on maps, non-existent streets put on maps to find copyright infringements, a plot somewhat reminiscent of the 2008 novel and 2015 film Paper Towns. And lo and behold, they find a trap street hidden behind a perception filter. The street is an alien refugee camp and its mayor is none other than me. Rigsy is accused of murder and at the end of the countdown will be killed by the Quantum Shade, personified as a raven, commanded by me. This starts a murder mystery with the help of an alien who can see into people's past, played by Letitia Wright, who would go on to have a very successful career as Shuri in the Black Panther films. They discover that there was no murder and the whole thing was a plot by some unknown higher-ups to get a teleport bracelet on the Doctor and him away from his TARDIS key. Case closed. Except Clara thought it would be clever to have the Quantum Shade passed on to her to protect Rigsy, but now it can't be undone and Clara is marked for death permanently.
We can fix this, can't we? We always fix it.
This episode, written by Sarah Dollard, was originally titled Trap Street, but was extensively rewritten to include Clara's death. We come to this scene where she steps out onto the street. The score, the direction, the performances, the dialogue between the Doctor and Clara in her final moments.
If this is the last I ever see of you, please. Not like this.
The slow motion and then her final breath being this dark black smoke. Everything about this scene is perfect.
You listen to me. You're gonna be alone now. You're gonna be furious, and you're gonna be sad. But listen to me, don't let this change you.
I'll be honest, when Clara died I had a sigh of relief. At 2.5 seasons she'd long outstayed her welcome. Her overbearing personality had felt distracting from the show, and the narrative importance that was repeatedly put on her character just felt unnecessary and undeserved for a character so unwell defined that she seemed to change each season. But in spite of my views on the character, I must admit that this death scene was beautifully handled and 100% manages to draw the emotions. Throughout this season it had been speculated on what the Doctor would do if anything happened to Clara.
So what's wrong with Clara then?
There's nothing wrong with her.
Why haven't you made her immortal? How many have you lost? How many Claras?
Well, now it has. The fury of the Time Lord has come out and he'll stop at nothing to get back at who did this.
I am the Doctor. I'm coming to find you, and I will never, ever stop.
A mysterious bloody hand pulls a lever and dissolves away. The Doctor beams into existence and steps out of the pod. He makes one thing clear. The next 50 minutes will be some of the greatest television ever put to screen. There are 4 driving forces behind this episode: Rachel Talalay's direction, Murray Gold's score, Stephen Moffat's writing, and least not of all, Peter Capaldi's acting. 55 minutes of Peter Capaldi wandering around a clockwork castle may not seem like much on paper, and some of the audience wasn't impressed, with the audience index score being a criminally low 79, this possibly being due to the lack of a Monster of the Week. But this ended up being one of the most beautifully and emotionally driven episodes of the show's run. The Doctor is trapped here, running away from the veil, a realisation of a childhood fear of a body he saw at a funeral on a warm day. What is wanted is for him to confess his secrets, but he can't. We get some hints towards the hybrid that had been briefly mentioned throughout the season. Some Time Lord legend the Doctor knows what it is and frightened him so much that it's the real reason he ran away from Gallifrey.
I confess, I'm afraid.
The episode may appear to be thin on plot, but just look how gorgeous it is. And it's a very slowly evolving story with the gradual revelations. Some have likened it to a metaphor for grief and depression, being trapped in this eternal repeating trap. Moffat has said that this was an unintentional allegory, but is glad that people had this resonance. My one criticism of the episode is the scenes where the Doctor imagines himself in the TARDIS, explaining things to an imaginary Clara as time seems to freeze, much like Sherlock's Mind Palace. This feels like Moffat letting some of his Sherlock slip into Doctor Who and is a Sherlockifying of the character. These scenes were most likely added to break up the monotony of the episode. But after 40 minutes of Capaldi and Talalay showing off their talent, we come to this 20-foot deep wall of, let's just say, diamond. On the other side is home. All he needs to do is reveal what the hybrid is and he's free.
The TARDIS. One confession away.
But he can't, so instead he punches the wall and starts to tell a story. Then the veil kills him. Burned, bloodied and dying, he crawls back to the teleport and burns himself to give it the power to essentially clone himself. He dies and it all starts again. Looking at the stars, he's 7,000 years in the future but hasn't time travelled. He's been doing this repeatedly for 7,000 years, punching the wall over and over again. The Shepherd's Boy, based on the Day of the Doctor track Now There's Three of Us, starts and we get this beautiful montage of the Doctor repeating the events of the episode over and over and over again, punching the wall and getting ever so gradually further and further. The sheer determination to do this for 4.5 billion years. This almost one-man show pushes the limit of what Doctor Who can be, and it's near impossible to think that any other TV show could pull this off, much less even attempt it. It is a beautiful masterpiece and is widely regarded as one of the greatest episodes ever.
Personally, I think that's a hell of a bird.
Thanks to funding from BBC America, this would be the first time Doctor Who was eligible for Primetime Emmys, and Heaven Sent is what they submitted for Best Actor, Writer and Director, amongst others. Though it did fail to get nominated. It did receive a Hugo nomination, however. Eventually he breaks through and finds himself on Gallifrey. It's revealed that he was inside the confession dial the whole time, hence the name. and we find out what the hybrid is.
A hybrid destined to conquer Gallifrey is me.
After Heaven Sent, Alistair Wilkins of the AV Club wrote, Hellbent could be an unmitigated disaster, and it still wouldn't undo the genius of Heaven Sent or Face the Raven before it. We're lucky this is the case, in spite of how hard it tries to. The Doctor strolls around Gallifrey, angrily. He goes back to the barn from the day of the Doctor and listen. He eats soup, angrily. He sleeps, angrily. He roam open cities, angrily. And now he's overthrown Rassilon. Yeah.
Get off his planet.
While they couldn't get Timothy Dalton back, we get Donald Stumper, who had previously appeared several times in Classic Who and the Sarah Jane Adventures, and is another Game of Thrones alumni. But his performance as Rassilon just doesn't have the power that Dalton did. Now the Doctor's taken over Gallifrey because Ahulia appears and they discuss the hybrid. The Doctor scoops Clara out of time in the moment of her last heartbeat. I sigh again, but this time in annoyance. Whilst the longer she's out, the more risk there is of her fracturing time. Until she goes back in, she's effectively immortal. Yet another example of Moffat backing out of a companion death, made even worse by how well it had been initially handled. It's at this point you know the rest of the episode is just going to be a yay Clara, how great is Clara, I wish we had more of Clara. Also, by the way, this episode is being narrated by the Doctor telling Clara this story in a cantina in Nevada.
Tell me about her.
The Doctor then murders an ally, showing both gender and race swapping regeneration from Ken Bones to Tania Miller, and he escapes the cloisters, populated by these creepy cloister wraiths and a bunch of Dalek sweeping angels and Cybermen. They escape in a stolen TARDIS with an original 60s design and go visit me. The Doctor and me discuss what the hybrid could be, including reference to the infamous half-human line from the movie, just why?
Why couldn't the hybrid be half Time Lord, half human?
And then conclude that it's the Doctor and Clara's toxic relationship.
What if the hybrid wasn't one person, but two?
Yes, that's the closest we get to a resolution to all this. In the end, the Doctor and Clara agree one of them needs their memory wiped, and it ends up being the Doctor. He's telling the story unable to remember anything about Clara herself, only the events around her. Meanwhile, Clara and me go travelling off on their own adventures in the Cantina TARDIS. The Doctor's reunited with his TARDIS, with Riggsy's mural to Clara on it, and he flies off. This episode really feels like an example of Moffat's coming up with loads of ideas that he thinks are clever and just throwing them into the episode, rushing from thing to thing in a confusing mess whilst nothing substantial actually happens. The only point of this episode seems to bring out the Doctor and Clara's toxicity and to give them a goodbye. But frankly, that had already been done better by the ending of Face the Raven, which has now been effectively undone. Despite seeing the return of Gallifrey, something fans have been waiting for a decade, it's only explained that they did it themselves at some point whilst the Doctor was in the confession dial.
We're at the end of the universe, give or take a star system. I know. They came the long way round.
The episode instead seems to prioritise this frankly self-masturbatory celebration of a fairly unpopular companion in place of any narrative importance. It could be argued that this is the intention. The Doctor and Clara's toxicity distracts from the important stuff, but ultimately that's just unsatisfying for the audience.
I know I went too far. I get it.
In its attempt to subvert, it just displayed exactly how not to write a good finale. And by ditching the decade-long Time War arc with no real plan, it would take the show years to find a replacement. The one thing I must point out that's quite nice is the moment when the Doctor plays Clara's theme on its guitar. There are a couple of nice moments throughout, but otherwise, in spite of Talali's gorgeous direction, delivering some beautiful shots, and Capaldi's performance, nothing can really save the mess that this episode is. And for many of the casual audience, this was seen as the final nail in the coffin for them turning off Who. Even today, it's still often quoted by people as when they gave up, along with the tank scene in The Magician's Apprentice. It's often debated whether Face the Raven, Heaven Sent and Hellbent are parts of a 2 or 3 part story. Heaven Sent and Hellbent were often advertised as a 2-parter, and Moffat had described this as being a trilogy. But the convention now is that they are 3 separate stories, partly due to people wanting Raven and Heaven to be as untainted as possible by Hellbent. And this is a real shame because Series 9 had been shaping up to be a real good season until this point. It's just in the finale, when the plot point should have been drawn to a conclusion, that it fails, bringing down the satisfaction of the rest of the season in hindsight. With the already unstable viewership, this finale would be one who would take years to recover from. Before I come to the end, there's another episode I need to cover. The second Christmas special in this video.
Do I know you? You most certainly do not. And now that you've met me, you'll do your very best to forget me.
This episode would mark the last appearance of River's song and essentially acts as a tribute to her character. On a snowy planet, the Doctor is mistaken for a surgeon who's performing surgery on King Hydroflax, played by comedy legend Craig Davies, to remove a diamond from his head. But the King is married to none other than River's song, and the whole thing's a plot by her and another husband, Ramon, to steal the diamond. Turns out River's been getting married left, right and centre this whole time, and with the new regeneration cycle doesn't recognise the Doctor. This leads to a fairly fun runaround for this trivial Christmas episode, with the robot of Hydroflax chasing him around with his head. Also it decapitates Nardole, played by Little Britain star Matt Lucas. Take note of this will be very important in the next video. For the most part, this is just a bit of fun, with the Doctor pretending to be ignorant of things, such as inside the TARDIS.
My entire understanding of physical space has been transformed!
And this whole restaurant being these brain things, Harmony Shoal, this will also come up again next video. Of course, what it's all leading up to is this beautiful moment when River realises who the Doctor is.
Hello, sweetie.
In the end, they find themselves crashed on Beryllium, the planet where River said she had last seen the Doctor for the first time we met her in silence in the library. The Doctor uses time travel shenanigans to make a restaurant in the perfect place for their final date, which they have, overlooking the Singing Towers. Little does River know that this is pretty much the last time she'll see the Doctor. He gives her the sonic screwdriver from Silence in the Library, and then, like a fairy tale ending, we get this final title. This episode would win a Saturn Award for Best Television Presentation, and Kingston would be nominated for Best Guest Star. To me, this episode feels very much like just a trivial runaround with the Christmassy atmosphere shoved on top, but I guess it's the emotional resonance of bringing the River Song storyline to an end that makes it as popular as it is. Alex Kingston's post-Who career doesn't wield as much as some others, with a fair bit of Big Finish work, largely in the Diary of River's Song series. Her most notable work since was a role in The Discovery of Witches. Jenna Coleman, however, would enjoy a largely successful career post-Who, with the lead role in the ITV series Victoria and mini-series The Cry and The Serpent. One present many children may have received on Christmas 2015 was the LEGO Doctor Who set. Ever since the first Star Wars LEGO sets in 1999, fans have been waiting for a Doctor Who set, and in 2015 they finally delivered with this. A rather small and disappointing set, it's just simply a TARDIS interior, and a fairly cluttered one. This set was clearly released as a pilot for a possible future range, but it didn't sell as well as they hoped, with there just not really being much appeal to it. From designs we can see they were at one point planning a small external diorama with the 10th Doctor, 4th Doctor, Rose and K9, but instead we only got to the 11th and 12th Doctor with Clara, Reaping Angel, Dalek and Cyberman, just not really enough there to warrant the set. What it did mean, however, was that Doctor Who could be included in the LEGO Dimensions video game that came out around the same time, where you could collect these figures to unlock parts of the game. Through the Doctor Who section, you could unlock this open world Doctor Who universe, where you could play as any Doctor and explore this LEGO world. This is the closest we have ever got to a full Doctor Who LEGO game, and boy did it show how much we needed one. The first thing that comes to mind with Series 9 for me is the cinematography. A much moodier, darker tone, but with some absolutely beautiful use of light. The directors of photography and directors must be commended, but this may largely be due to the work of Michael Pickwood, the production designer between 2010 and 2017, having worked on films such as With Nail and I. He died soon after in 2018, having been key to the visual beauty of the Moffat era. This darker tone gave a moodier feel to the series, feeling much more grown up than the frankly plasticky feeling previous couple of seasons. In fact, thematically and tonally, this season feels a lot more young adult oriented. This is likely a result of, as with Series 8, the episodes being pushed back to make way for Strictly Come Dancing, jumping up and down the schedule from 8 to 8:30, with episodes being pushed back to ending after the 9 PM watershed. The more young adult oriented approach really works for the show in my opinion, feeling a lot more behind the sofa and allowing it to explore characters and themes more deeply, which was the main focus of the season. However, to make your season arc also be a character arc with little narrative presence, or worse coming at the cost of the narrative, was a bad call and ended up making the season overall feel unsatisfying and feel like there isn't any real connection, only to find yourself at the dumpster fire that is Hellbent. Despite the benefits in quality provided by this later slot, it didn't do much to help the audience figures. There are a number of factors that could be given for the ratings crash of this season, the dwindling audience goodwill and reception of the abrasive Doctor being the most common, but the later schedule is most likely what caused this death in momentum. Unfortunately, the higher-ups saw this as a fault of the resurrection of two-parters, so went back to the almost entirely single-episode format and are still insistent on this to this day. This is in spite of the clear upgrade in quality, and this being the age of on-demand where being 1 or 10 parts long doesn't make a difference to the binge-watching masses, and it allows for exploration of narrative ideas such as in Under the Lake Before the Flood. Frankly, why nowadays this is kept only to finales is beyond me. Ultimately, for all it did right this season, it's marred by its wrongs, and so the good was pretty much abandoned going forwards, which was a real shame. The experimental failure of Sleep No More, the damp script finale, and the messy opening all killed off the resonance of the rest of the season, and so in the following years we'd find a slew of small, safe, and frankly dull episodes with little draw. However, by this point, Moffat had finally managed to coerce Chris Chibnall into taking over as showrunner, but not until after the third and final season of Broadchurch. As a result, Moffat would have to make one more final season before calling it in, but that wouldn't be until after a dreaded gap year. Fans would however be able to use this time to explore expanded media. Oh yeah, I'm done with Series 9, now you can move on. Expanded media, by this point most dominated by Big Finish. Shortly after the 50th anniversary, Big Finish were able to obtain the rights to the Revival series characters, so long as they weren't in current use by the BBC, meaning that in 2015 they were able to launch audio series featuring the 10th and War Doctors, as well as spin-offs featuring Churchill, Riversong and Torchwood. Since I last spoke of Big Finish, the company has massively grown in the time of Doctor Who's revival. Due to his popularity, the 8th Doctor got his own 8th Doctor adventures, separate to the monthly range, featuring Lucy Miller, played by Sheridan Smith, who was very much a response to Rose Tyler, which got broadcast on BBC Radio 3. Tom Baker eventually joined the company in 2012 after having enjoyed doing the Cottage Nest Chronicles for the BBC. Since acquiring the rights to New Who, David Tennant, John Hurt, David Bradley and even Christopher Eccleston in 2021 have joined, with the 11th and 12th Doctors getting these odd appearances from voice actor Jacob Dudman. John Pertwee and John Hurt have also been recast for audio, played by Tim Treloar and Jonathan Carley respectively. As of today, there are more than 1,000 Doctor Who related Big Finish audio plays. In 2021, the monthly series came to an end after issue 275, The End of the Beginning, for which it was awarded the world record for longest ever audio series. Big Finish is now also the UK's largest producer of audio dramas. Instead, they adopted the formats that had been popular with the 1st, 3rd, 4th, 8th, War, 9th and 10th Doctors, and have separate ranges for the 5th, 6th and 7th Doctors. That is on top of all the spin-offs and spin-offs from spin-offs that they have to offer, dragging in big names such as Eric Roberts, and every living Doctor and companion actor up to the Matt Smith era having made appearances. There have also been some ranges adapting other materials. The Lost Stories adapting unmade scripts has been popular. Novel adaptations, however, have not sold as well as hoped. There is no sign of the company slowing down. Now that the Whittaker era has ended, there are already audios with Joe Martin's Fugitive Doctor and Sacha Dhawan's Master, as well as Whittaker starting her own series later this year. However, this bigger output is starting to raise the issue of quantity over quality. Some ranges have started to become seemingly diluted, and some new ranges just be there for the cash grab. Like, who wants a New Earth spin-off? There also seems to be Time War box sets for everything. 8th Doctor the Time War, the Time War Master, the 5th Doctor the Time War, Gallifrey the Time War, Susan the Time War. It seems that they now operate in this area of very marginal profits, needing to produce as much as possible in order to make as much of the small profit margin as they can. This has created what has become known as the Big Finish dartboard, with characters and monsters being thrown together seemingly at random, with less emphasis on original ideas and stories. As much of a service in preserving the show as they had offered, and allowing people to continue to experience their favourite eras, the truth is Big Finish will never be able to capture the imagination and ambition that it did back in the Wilderness years.